Today's episode is brought to you by Larosse Media Incorporated. They make professional videos to fit any budget, so next time you need a commercial, promo, or corporate video, think Larosse. Check them out at larossemedia.com. Hello and welcome to the Stinking Albatross Podcast. My name is Alissa Galobe, and I'm here in the new year of 2024 with my partner in crime, Scott Hayward. How's it going, Scott?
Good, pretty good, Alyssa. I'm actually surprised that we're not in each other's jerseys right now, like you in your Leafs jersey and me in my Jets jersey, because we have a rare, I don't know if it's ever happened before since the Jets came back into the league, a rare home and home between the Jets and the
That's
Leafs.
correct.
Yeah.
I will not be watching, though. I just can't. I can't do it.
I will be abandoning my familial obligations and watching the games. It will be interesting though, because like the Leafs are healthy, but like super erratic lately.
Yeah.
It seems like. Apparently TJ, like I've been guilty of this, of being like, why does TJ Brody suck this year? Apparently his wife had MS and his dad died or something like that.
Oh.
So yeah.
I'm less about, why does TJ Brody suck, and more like, why does Tavares suck?
Well, I mean, age for Tavares, but yeah. So hopefully, people in the Leafs market can ease up a little bit on TJ, because Josh Morrissey had a year like that. Also, another fantastic defenseman, and he bounced back, and I think Brody will bounce back. So
I don't know. I don't know who's a Leafs fan that's listening to this, but watching the games is physically painful because you'll watch the first period and you'll be like, this is the worst hockey I've ever watched. Like, I don't think I can do this for another two periods. And then the second period, it's like, this is amazing. And it's just
you don't have to worry, Alyssa, because you have more than two periods usually with the Leafs. You have overtime. That's almost guaranteed. Do they not have more overtime wins than they do regulation wins at this point?
Well, the last, like, the streak that they're going on with the 2-point lead and then losing, none of them have been overtime. They've lost. And usually it's like they're behind a goal and then they get it. The other team gets it, scores an empty netter, like almost all the time. So it's just like, oh, it's so painful. And then even against Vancouver, oh man, that was such a roller coaster, and I hated it, loved it, and then hated it. So anyway, I just don't think I can do it. I probably will, and we'll talk about it. But yeah, it sucks. I'm like, I can't say this to my husband, but I kind of rooting for the Oilers, and um I really wanted the Leafs to pick up Corey Perry. Like, he got a pretty good defenseman for a really cheap amount. That's exactly what we need. But now that I think that's a good move on the Oilers' part. And this like 14 win streak is crazy. So
what are we talking about today?
Okay, so it's the new year. It's very dead right now, but what is happening and heating up are nomination races and different candidates that are being announced. So we'll definitely talk about that. But first, let's talk about what's happening poll-wise, because every week or every couple weeks, you see the Conservatives just blasting out these polls. They're so amazing. We're absolutely desecrating Justin Trudeau when it comes to the numbers. So I just did a quick peek before this podcast, and I look at the Too Close to Call because he kind of has doesn't he have like all the polls kind of averaged out? So basically the last one that he posted, I think yesterday, was that he had the CPC at 209 seats, which would be up 90 seats from 2021. The Liberals at 53, which is minus 107. The Bloc at 42, which is plus 10, and then the NDP at 37, which is plus 12, and the Green at 2. And then according to an Angus Reid poll yesterday, most Canadians who plan on voting for the Liberal Party are more motivated to stop the Conservatives from winning the election rather than endorsing Justin Trudeau or any of the policies of the Liberal Party, whereas they found the opposite when it came to the Conservatives, that they believe more in the Conservative values and the leader. So those are rather interesting. I wonder if they'll change it all. Probably not when it comes to Trudeau, but probably when it comes to the seats. Maybe we'll see, but what is your chartered accountant / nerd analysis?
Well, first off, if you look at the polls for the last probably 6 months, for the second half of 2023 into 2024, there's no doubt that basically every single poll is fantastic for the Conservatives. They've seemed to have topped out, but I mean, you're plateauing at a pretty good place. in almost every region, whether it be British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and most of the time Atlantic Canada, the Conservatives are leading now mostly in all those areas by double digits. They're more or less in the same place in Quebec. Sometimes they, flirt with 25%, but they're usually kind of in around 20, 23, maybe just below 20. So, all around, whether it be, different age groups, different demographics, whether it be by education, by income level, the Conservatives are doing quite well. But so here I went through some of the numbers, and there's some things to consider. So as of today, like if in our election today, I think most polling aggregates say that the Conservatives would get about 185, maybe 190 seats. More than 200 seems a little bit much right now. And then the Liberals would be, in around kind of 80 to 90, maybe 83, something like that. So right now, the average for the polling as of today, at the end of January, is the Conservatives are sitting around 40%, the Liberals at 27, the NDP at 19, and the PPC at 3. So we compare this to 3 months ago, the Conservatives were at 40, the Liberals were at 25, the NDP at 18, and the PPC at 3. What we saw going into the Christmas break, just as the House was rising to go to recess for the Christmas break, and the House comes back in the next few days here, we saw the Liberals tighten up a little bit. So there was a few polls where the Conservatives weren't, at 41, 42, 43. They were more at, kind of 38, 39. And the Liberals weren't at, 23, 24. They were more at, 26, 27, 28. That tightening. So the average gap, was kind of more of like a kind of like a 16, 17, 18. And one poll even had them at a 20% gap. That's tightened up. I mean, it's still a massive lead. It tightens, like right now, if you take an aggregate, it's a 13% lead. Some polls have it as low as 10, some have, 13, 14. So it has tightened up a little bit, but it's still not great for Justin Trudeau. Compared to a year ago, so at the end of January 2023, the Conservatives were at 36%, the Liberals at 32%, the NDP at 17%, and the PPC at 3%. So compared to a year ago, compared to a year ago, the Conservatives are up 4%, and the Liberals are down 5%, and the NDP up 2%. So the Liberals have lost a little bit both to the NDP and to the Conservatives. What's really, really fascinating is that the Conservatives aren't really eating into the PPC pool. They're eating into the Liberal pool, which is very, very interesting. And you kind of see that with some of the new rhetoric coming out from Pierre Poilievre in the Conservative Party of Canada. They're using things like the common sense consensus. So what he means by that when he uses it in his speeches is that, there was this common sense consensus that existed from the early 1980s all the way up until 2015, 2015 being when Justin Trudeau was elected with a majority government. So he's basically trying to say, like, those Brian Mulroney's and those Jean Chrétiens and those Stephen Harpers, they're all kind of the same. Maybe they disagreed on, minor things here and there. That basically there's this common sense consensus, which is really interesting because I personally was not a fan of the Chrétien Liberals and the Martin Liberals, or the Liberals in between Martin and Trudeau. Most definitely the Trudeau Liberals. So I don't know. I guess I don't have common sense, but I'm not part of that consensus.
And
And then,
also, he won the leadership because he had more right wing rhetoric. And I know we always see that during leadership races, they go really far right and then they go more center. But I mean, he's completely switching from like freedom, to, oh, Chrétien was, let's be more like Chrétien and Martin. And it's kind of like, I wonder if voters see that or they just don't care, like conservative voters, I mean.
well, yeah, this will be interesting. So if we compare this to the 2021 federal election campaign, which is now 2.5 years ago, the Conservatives got 34%, so they're up 6 compared to that as of today. The Liberals got 33%, so they're down 6. So there's your switch. The NDP got 18%, they're up 1, and the PPC got 5%, down 2. So the big switches between the Liberals and the Conservatives, particularly in places like Ontario, British Columbia, and Atlantic Canada. One thing I've found was really interesting is Abacus does more polling that's available than Leger does. Those two polling firms were rated the most accurate in the last federal election being 2021. So I kind of like to follow them the closest because their numbers in the last election campaign were the most accurate. Abacus, in their latest poll of January this month, so January 2024, for those between the ages of 18 and 29, so we're talking, millennials, Generation Z, the Conservatives, 32%, the NDP, 28%, the Liberals, 18%, the PPC, 9%, and then overall, for all voters, not just those in that age group, Pierre Poilievre has a plus 6% approval rating. Justin Trudeau has a minus 34%. That's really important. We'll get back to that. The same company, Abacus, looking at the same age demographic, 18 to 29 in January 2023, the Conservatives, 32%, no change. The NDP, 28%, no change. The Liberals, 24%, so they're down 6. The PPC, 7%, up 2. Overall, for all voters in all age groups, regions, all that, the approval rating for Pierre Poilievre, minus 3%. The approval rating for Justin Trudeau, minus 19%. And if you look at the polling throughout the last year, being 2023, it was basically, the Liberals and the Conservatives kind of neck and neck. The Conservatives maybe with, kind of like 35% and Liberals 30%. But what really broke it wide open, almost to the day, is when the Bank of Canada announced that the overnight interest rate was going to go to 5%. And then, boom, there's this huge gap. What this suggests to me, and if I were working in the office of leader opposition, I would like to think at least I'd be cognizant of this, is while Justin Trudeau's numbers have gone down, Pierre Poilievre's personal numbers have not gone up by the same amounts. And so what it suggests to me is that right now the electorate has a really big problem with Justin Trudeau. I mean, I've had a big problem with Justin Trudeau, right from the beginning. They have their own reasons, probably mainly economic, a lot to do with the interest rates, and just with kind of inflation in general. Now, inflation has come down. It's still not as low as people would like it. The interest rates are probably going to come down. I wouldn't be surprised before the next election in October 2025. I don't think it would come down a ton. I think maybe from 5% to 4%. But what will be interesting to me is that what if people aren't as angry at Justin Trudeau? Like, I don't think Justin Trudeau is going to get all those people back. I really don't. But, if you think about it, they just need to swing 3% away from the Conservatives to them, because then that 13-point gap becomes a 7-point gap, and then things are a little more manageable. Because that same poll that you're citing, Alissa, Angus Reid, one of the things that they had mentioned was they looked into, okay, how many of you who are voting, who say that you intend to vote for the NDP, vote for the Bloc, vote for the Greens or other parties, if it looked like the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre were going to win a majority government, how many of you would switch your vote to the Liberals just to stop Pierre Poilievre? And this was really interesting. So according to Angus Reid, overall, the numbers across the country are 41% for the Conservatives, 24% for the Liberals, 20% NDP, 9% Bloc, 4% Green, 3% other parties. So that's basically PPC. If people switched their votes to the Liberals to stop the Conservatives, obviously the Conservatives stay the same at 41%. The NDP go down to 13%. The Bloc go down to 7%. The Green go down to 3%. The other parties go down to 2%. And the Liberals go from 24% to 35%. I say this because in the last election campaign in 2021, even though you weren't a fan of Aaron O'Toole and I wasn't a fan of Aaron O'Toole, and I think a lot of people who are watching this podcast weren't a fan of Aaron O'Toole, they actually had some pretty interesting policies that, of course, he unfortunately reneged on, whether it be guns, whether it be conscientious objection rights, which was a really big one. I know there was one or two other ones that he flip-flopped on. I think there's like 4 or 5, maybe even 6 flip-flops, a flip-flop a week. On average, of course, it didn't happen until after Labor Day because the Liberals are smart and no one was paying attention to an election campaign in summer especially when, what was that, summer 2021? That was summer that everything was supposed to be open forever in Alberta. Like you have to, it's kind of crazy to think to go back to, but people have to remember that
Yeah.
that summer of 2021 was quite a bit different than 2020, and that you can actually do things. So I think people weren't really paying attention to politics, even though there was a national election campaign until Labor Day. So at the beginning of the campaign in August 15th, so I pulled these numbers from Leger because they had the best numbers in the last campaign. They had the Liberals, so this is the first day of the campaign, Liberals at 35, Conservatives 30, NDP 20, PPC 2. In the middle of the campaign, so 2 weeks later on August 30th, it was Liberals 30, Conservatives 34, NDP 24, PPC 3. So the Liberals have lost some and the NDP and the Conservatives gained. Then things tightened up so that on election day, it was Liberals 33, Conservatives 34, NDP 18. So the NDP went from 24% in the middle of the campaign to 18. So you have to remember that. That's 6%. That kind of makes sense that if the NDP are 20% according to Angus Reid, and Angus Reid saying that goes down to 13, that's 7% difference. So that kind of checks out. And PPC 5. So they gained a little bit from the Conservatives. From August 23rd to September 9th, because September 9th was the first leaders debate, the Conservatives on most polls on average were leading by 4 percentage points. There were some polls where they were leading by double digits by like 10%. The first week of September, that whole first week after or leading up to the debate, the Conservatives were leading by 5%. This is all to say that campaigns matter and things can change pretty quick. So at one point at the end of August, the Conservatives in August 2021 were looking at winning potentially a majority government, and the Liberals were 10 seats shy of forming majority government. I remember listening to different podcasts and reading different tweets from different Liberal insiders saying if they had one more week in an election campaign, they're convinced they would have got a majority government. I mean, they basically did with the supply agreement with the NDP is more or less a coalition. This is all to say that this is fantastic for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives right now, that they're leading by this relatively massive margin. The election campaign isn't for another 18 months. Justin Trudeau, as low as he is, I don't know how much lower he can get, which is just to say that he can do a little bit better. And going from a approval rating of minus 34% to, let's say, minus 20, that can make a difference. And if you have like 10 percentage points in the bag in the other parties, that scare them enough, and if it looks like Trump is going to be winning the Republican nomination now that DeSantis is out, there's a good chance that he's going to be the next president, whether Biden is the Democrat nominee or someone else. The Liberals have a whole year to tie Pierre Poilievre to Donald Trump. And the other thing about that too, Alissa, and then I'll stop at the buffet here because I'm starting to run out of space, is unlike 2016, in 2024, there's a much higher percentage of people who say they intend to vote conservative in the next election, who, if they could vote between Trump and Biden, would vote Trump. It's a 50-50 split, whereas in 2016, it was only something like 16, or it was less than 20%, I believe, of conservative voters said that they would vote for Trump. So good times for the Conservatives right now, good polls for the last 6 months. But like they say in sports, where we talked at the beginning, they're not handing out the Stanley Cup in January, and there's not an election now in January 2024. It's almost definitely not going to happen to October 2025.
Yeah, so I guess that was my question while you were talking about some of the numbers, is like trying to get into Justin Trudeau's head, because he's coming up on 10 years. That's usually when people are sick and tired of the later and want to switch. He's doing badly in the polls. It's like the Emergency Act was unconstitutional. Like he kind of is piling up the losses. I don't think people super care about his vacations, but
No.
another vacation thing with the Jamaica vacation recently. That he didn't pay for. And I'm just wondering, like, what is he thinking? Because he's very adamant that he'll be the leader into the next election. I'm sure that there's people within the Liberal caucus who don't want that. Is he thinking the way that you're thinking? Listen, this is the numbers now. These are the numbers now. In 18 months, they could be very different. We have a strategy to just hammer Pierre. We know inflation numbers are coming down. We know interest rates will probably come down. That'll make a difference. Like, do you think he's relying on all these things for the election, or do you think he's just like a prideful, stubborn ass who's just not going to step down?
I mean, if you're in politics and you're a leader of a political party, you have to have some sort of level of stubbornness and pride and egomaniaism to do a job like that. That doesn't. I'm not calling leaders of our political parties egotistical, egomaniacal, or anything like that. I'm just saying you have to have some sort of element of it in order to
Hmm.
play the game, so to speak. So I mean, I'm sure there's some of that. I don't know if I were the Liberals, he's still the best athlete for them to put onto the field. Like I
Yeah.
think, when I listen to him speak, I don't like what he has to say in terms of the content the vast majority of the time. I think he's actually gotten better compared to when he ran in 2015 and even in 2019. I think he's less breathy. I think he's more real. I think he's more dark, if that makes any sense. Like, and so to me, I find that a little more relatable. Not
Yeah,
that
it'll
he
be interesting too if the debates make a difference because I find Pierre to be a little bit unhinged compared to Trudeau. So maybe the conservatives absolutely love that and they love him hammering Trudeau as much as possible, but I find it sort of jarring. And I'm wondering if the average voter will as well, like who's kind of undecided and then sees like this kind of bully not letting him speak kind of thing. Like I wonder if he'll tone that down because he does that currently in the House of Commons, and I'm wondering if he'll tone it down in the debates to be more likable to the average voter or undecided voter. That'll be interesting too. I don't know how much debates make a difference, to be honest, or how many people are going to be watching them. I think they'll be more tuned into Biden and Trump because it'll be more entertaining. But
I
that's
would
another
think that,
thing.
yeah, I would think for this election, coming up in October 2025, I think this will be one of the more watched debates between Trudeau and Poilievre.
Yeah.
Um, I do think that Trudeau, as of today, is the better debater. I remember Poilievre debating in the leadership races, if you could call those debates, and I didn't find it. I thought Jean Charest was generally the best in terms of actually debate style. Even though like he was last on my ballot or something like that, or even on my ballot, I can't really remember. Um, but that's again, things change. So does Pierre Poilievre get better at debates between now and then? I mean, it's kind of hard when you don't do it, and I know that leaders often take debate prep pretty seriously. I mean, I guess like for the conservatives, there's not a whole lot to worry about as of today.
Hmm.
I don't know how sustainable a 13-point gap is. I mean, obviously, a 16-point gap and a 20-point gap wasn't all that sustainable because that's already been whittled away. But 13-point gap is still quite significant, with a 10 points gap in Ontario and places like that. Um, yeah, I think it's too early to say. Like, and if I were the Liberals, like, well, who are we replacing Justin Trudeau with? So
Yeah.
you have 5 percentage points of the electorate that are now sitting with the Conservatives that voted for Justin Trudeau 3 times already in 2015, in 2019, and 2021. So they do have that history. Obviously, they're pissed off at him over something, probably the current state of the economy. Um, Particularly with inflation, not so much economy, because one thing we have noticed in Canada is that we haven't seen the job rate change. People still have jobs. People still have pretty good paying jobs for the most part. Uh, what people are kind of feeling pinched out on is prices have gone up and wages haven't gone up with it. Um,
Hmm.
and so and interest rates obviously going up from 0% in 2020 to now 5% is a big change. The effects of it do take some time, but it will have an effect. And it already has. I don't know if people notice this or not, but for gas prices, housing prices, and my wife and I are always looking to buy homes. We notice a big difference here in the market here in Manitoba, in Brandon, for example. Houses that were posted last Christmas, so Christmas of 2022, those same houses that get posted now in January of 2024 have gone down by 100 to $150,000.
Absolutely.
So like it takes time, and if those numbers are improved, then his numbers can potentially improve. Plus, Trudeau has that kind of 10% in his back pocket if he needs to bring it out to scare people to voting for him. So I don't know if I were a Liberal caucus member, like obviously I would be concerned. I wouldn't be happy. I'd be more happy with the government today than I would compared to a year ago because And I've noticed this in Pierre's rhetoric as well. As he's attacking not just Justin Trudeau now, but Justin Trudeau and Sean Fraser. Sean Fraser is now the new federal minister for housing, and it actually is coming, whether you agree with his policies or not, he's actually coming out with policies and implementing them, which is very rare for this Liberal government to do, particularly under Justin Trudeau. So if his cabinet's getting serious about this stuff and at least attempting, and if some of it happens to work a little bit, who knows? October 2025 can, I mean, it's almost guaranteed that October 2025 is going to look different than January 2024 and things are going to change in between. But all that being said, the polls as of today, yeah, I think the Conservatives would win a comfortable majority, and the Liberals will be well under 100 seats.
Nature communicates with us in a universal language. The sunrise starts a new day. The sunset marks our accomplishments.
The most beautiful communication is where the speaker and the listener match perfectly and understand the same message.
Your future audience is waiting to hear from you. What message do you need to share?
At LaRosse Media, we fashion beautiful communications through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Create your own most beautiful message. Visit larosmedia.com and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
All right, switching it up a little bit, we did have the anniversary, or what was Roe v. Wade, a couple days ago, and Trudeau did not comment, but Jagmeet Singh did, and he said that it's been 2 years since Roe v. Wade was overturned, um, and that basically we need to remain vigilant to ensure that Canadians have access to safe abortion everywhere in our country, and what's probably the most annoying response, in my opinion, are conservatives who say that the Liberals and the NDP are doing poorly in the polls, so they're trying to distract from a closed issue. And I think that's like the worst talking point because you're not even responding in any tangible way. You're just trying to shut down something that's just clearly not going away. Even if you say that you think it's going away, there's still tens of thousands of voters in the country who vote solely on that issue, number one, who
Tens of
donate,
thousands,
who
indeed, hundreds of
volunteer,
thousands.
who volunteer. Like you can't just because you say that it's a closed issue doesn't at all make it one. And that's why it comes up every election, and that's why leaders should have a proper response and one that's different from the Liberals and Jagmeet Singh. Um, so, and on the heels of that, we had the Conservatives announce two kind of bigger name, I guess, candidates in the Conservative Party. I believe was so I Sabrina Maddow, who is a freelance columnist for the National Post, she's running in the nomination in Richmond Hill, and Ellis Ross, who it was a former BC Liberal Party cabinet minister. He ran for the BC Liberal Party leadership, and now he's a current BC United MLA. Um, and I don't. Did Ellis, was he
He's
just
acclaimed.
appointed? Oh, he
He's
was
acclaimed.
acclaimed. Okay,
Yeah.
so Ellis was just
No
acclaimed,
one,
but
no one wanted to run against him.
yeah. And then Sabrina is running in the nomination. So both of these candidates, are being hailed and celebrated. People are very excited about Sabrina. She talks a lot about inflation and the housing crisis. She was the first to interview Poilievre when he won his leadership race. She's also an extreme abortion advocate. Like, she basically has written multiple articles about Trudeau not doing enough about abortion and how he has to expand access and actually put his words into practical use instead of just kind of virtue signaling. And Ellis Ross, he's a little bit better than Sabrina, but still an abortion advocate. And then also with regards to assisted suicide, is iffy on that as well, given he has an Indigenous background and does a lot of work in the Indigenous field, it's kind of a disappointment to see that he's not very strongly against assisted suicide since it affects that demographic in a pretty large way. So these are two candidates that, yeah, sure, they want housing prices to come down and inflation to come down, and they don't want to cancel Canada Day, but on the other hand, they're like lock and step with the Liberals when it comes to social issues and probably other issues as well.
Yeah, it's just Sabrina in particular is extreme on abortion. She's more extremely pro-abortion than Justin Trudeau, which is pretty crazy to think. So she wrote this opinion piece in September 2021. So this is during the last federal election campaign, and this is when the Conservatives were leading in general in the polls by 7 percentage points, and they were knocking on the door of a majority government. What does she have to say here? So she says, let me find it.
I remember her saying that abortion should be an election issue
but
because
not
we
on
should
the way
have
that
more.
Justin Trudeau,
Yeah, we should have more abortion policies that expand access, make it easier for women, that kind of thing. So she's all in favor of abortion becoming an election issue, and the opposite effect that it should be, specifically with regards to conservatism.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's very strange to have these politicians who here's the quote I wanted. When it comes to reproductive and sexual health, so she's talking about abortion, decriminalized abortions are basically the bottom of the barrel. That Canada hasn't moved significantly forward on this issue in 30 plus years comes down to a lack of leadership and politicians who'd rather obfuscate the issue to score points than engage in thoughtful, ongoing, nuanced dialogue. Had Trudeau meaningfully addressed or spoken about even a third of the issues mentioned in this column prior to this week, I'd be more inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt. But outside of campaign season, there's barely been a peep. Thus, it's difficult to see his newest promises as anything but opportunistic drivel here until election day, then gone the next. The promise that she's talking about, of course, is that the Liberals would take away the charitable status for crisis pregnancy centers, which she totally supports, and apparently she says doesn't go far enough. So it's interesting to me, when the Conservative Party of Canada does interviews for its candidates, which of course every political party does in this country, federally and provincially, one of the questions they have is there anything you disagree with in the party platform? So I wonder, because our official party platform is that we are not going to be funding abortions overseas if we were to win government again. And by we, I mean the Conservative Party of Canada. That the Conservative Party of Canada condemns sex-selective abortion, and that the Conservative Party of Canada would have free votes on the issues of abortion and assisted suicide and like things. So I'm tremendously curious. Does Sabrina support these things? And if not, is that going to be a problem for Pierre Poilievre and the leadership? Is that going to be a problem for other pro-life members of caucus to sit in what's called super caucus? So that includes all current caucus members and nominated candidates for non-held ridings. And should she win that seat, how comfortable they're going to be with her sitting with them in caucus? What if she's appointed to cabinet? What if she's in charge, because that's a little bit of her background as a columnist, of finances? Are we funding more abortions overseas, particularly illegal abortions in Africa, which the Trudeau government has been caught on? So these are all very interesting questions, like how conservative is this woman? And that goes for Ellis Ross as well. I mean, yes, the BC Liberal Party up until recently was, a conglomeration, if you will, between federal Liberals and federal Conservatives. Now the BC Conservative Party is pulling much higher and is having serious candidates run for nominations. And it looks like it's going to do some pretty significant damage in a positive way in the coming provincial election in BC. I'm sure we'll talk about that in future episodes.
Yeah. I would even question if either of these people had their membership prior to running.
That would be interesting to know too, because in order to run as a candidate, you must have be a member of the party unless you got a waiver. And so, if that's the case, why are these candidates getting waivers But you have someone like Garrett Van Dorlen, who was not allowed to run in Oxford, a seat that we almost lost in a by-election to the Justin Trudeau Liberals. So
who's a conservative staffer.
yes, or
Yeah.
was at least.
Yeah.
And now is apparently, according to some reports, that whole nomination is being investigated for, guess what? Foreign interference, in this case from the Modi government in India, as opposed to China, which happens with the Trudeau Liberals.
Yes, but if you oppose Sabrina, then you're a sexist. And if you oppose what happened in Oxford, then you're a racist. And the
Right.
conservatives use all the same hands as, they take all their lines from the Liberal Party playbook. And it's just like, it's eye-rolling, nauseating.
So if liberals or like actual conservatives like us oppose Sabrina and that is sexist, that means that by that logic, that those people saying that can't oppose Chrystia Freeland or
Yeah.
Melanie Jolie or Rachel Notley when she was leader. Like the logic falls apart because it's not based on any actual principle. It's just, we are against Justin Trudeau and like that's it. Like that's the only
Yeah.
party ideology that they have. Whereas you have someone like Premier Blaine Higgs in New Brunswick that's actually fighting for something and fighting, like actually fighting. And then you have the BC Conservatives getting ready for a provincial election in BC and taking strong stances on hot topic issues that tons of people across British Columbia, not just in the lower mainland, but also in Metro Vancouver and on Vancouver Island as well, support. Those are, exciting things. What the Conservative Party of Canada is doing here is, yeah, it's really unfortunate. Hopefully, she loses that nomination to a pro-lifer.
Yeah. And we know what Ellis Ross said because we interviewed him when he was running for the BC Liberal leadership. And one of the things that caught my eye when I was rereading it in preparation for this podcast is that he kept saying, oh, well, these issues don't come up on the campaign trail. And I absolutely hate it when politicians say that because I know for a fact they're lying. And they just say that when they don't want to deal with something. And I remember hearing Andrew Scheer say that. And yet I was living in downtown Toronto at the time that he was running, and I went to an event that he was holding close to the U of T campus, and it was at this big bar that was absolutely packed full of people, and there was a huge blizzard that night. So he was like 2 hours late, but everybody stayed, like nobody left. They were waiting for him when he came in. Everyone was super pumped. And like one of the first questions when the floor was opened was, are you pro-life or pro-choice? And I remember specifically him saying, I am pro-life, and the entire room erupted in applause. Like everyone was like cheering and hollering and happy. And then when it quieted down, he said, but I won't reopen the abortion debate. And like two people in the corner clapped that I think were there to oppose him. Like it was just, I've seen this time and time again when I go to political events that politicians are always asked about this, specifically leadership candidates. So don't try and tell me that these issues don't come up on the campaign trail, especially when it comes to assisted suicide because of all the abuses that are happening. And they absolutely will now, and especially in the future, now that they're trying to take away restrictions on those for the mentally ill and mature minors. So I just don't buy that excuse, and that's something that he used during our interview as well. Moving on to
I guess Sabrina Maddow, am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Maddow is part of Pierre's common sense consensus. So
yes. Okay, honestly, like every week it's like vacation, just inflation, housing, back to vacation. Like they cannot talk about any other issues if their lives depended on it.
why would they?
And
They're leading 13 points in the polls.
it is just nauseating. I can't honestly even there's not like one politician talking about issues that I care about ever these days, and it is just mind-numbing, to be honest.
I'll give an exception to Blaine Higgs.
Yeah, exactly. That's where it's at right now. Our final topic is the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta backed off their forced referral policy recently after hearing from the public. So basically, they were going to put forward under their conscientious objection standard a clause for forced referral so that physicians and nurses within the province would be forced to have a forced referral plan in case they didn't want to do a procedure. They needed to send those patients elsewhere to doctors who would commit those procedures, whether it be assisted suicide or abortion. But they did say they wanted to hear from the public. So anyone who lived in Alberta, regardless of whether you were a healthcare professional or not, could respond. And because of the overwhelming response against forced referral, they dropped it. So they said, based on the initial feedback, the term effective referral will be removed from the conscientious objection standard. So of course it could still be put through at any point, so we have to absolutely remain vigilant. But there were lots of different comments on the website. One specifically, Ashana, who is an Alberta physician, Ashana Burkholder, said that if the new wording was kept in place, it would force her and others to participate even at arm's length to a procedure she's morally opposed to, something she views akin to murder, and she will unable to continue practicing medicine in the province. And
Right,
she said
because they
many
can afford to not have physicians in Alberta.
Yeah, exactly. Many physicians are ethically opposed to newer aspects of medicine, such as assisted suicide, as well as established controversial medical services such as abortion. And another thing to note is that the Supreme Court promised not to violate conscientious rights when they decriminalized MAID, and yet here the Alberta physicians and surgeons are trying to push that through. And what kind of bothers me is that, you know, a lot of those appointments are done by the United Conservative Party, the provincial government here. So they should sort of be giving them their marching orders and not the other way around. And we have two very pro-life health ministers here, and Adriana LaGrange and Dan Williams. And, this shouldn't even come up. The minute it comes up, they should be on the horn being like, no, this isn't going to be one of the policies. And that should be the end of it. But regardless, I do think that it is positive that they listen to the feedback and drop the clause.
Well, it should absolutely give motivation and what's the word I'm looking for? I guess courage, fortitude to the United Conservative Party of Alberta government to go forward with legislation to make it into law, into statute for conscientious objection when it comes to assisted suicide and frankly to other procedures as well for healthcare professionals right across Alberta. This is something that we have in Manitoba, and we've had in Manitoba getting close to 10 years now. It's 2024. This legislation came in, I believe, in 2017. And now we have a new government provincially in Manitoba, an NDP government under Bob Canoe, who's like one of the most conservative premiers out there now. Like, we have the lowest gas prices in this country because of Bob Canoe, and he's putting the carbon tax into review. That's an NDP premier. There's been no indication from him or his cabinet. It's early days, mind you, right? Because he just got elected this past autumn, that they're going to repeal that statute for conscientious objection. And so if they pass this in Alberta, like we passed it in Manitoba, like there's a chance, especially with Rachel Notley no longer being leader of the NDP there, though granted, I think she was keeping a lot of the crazies at bay. There's a chance that legislation would stay. I mean, the NDP put in legislation right before Jason Kenney won the election in 2019, the general provincial election. They put in legislation for bubble zones around abortion clinics. And to this date, a second term, almost a full year into its second term, Conservative government in Alberta hasn't done anything with it. Yeah. So, the proof is in the pudding right across the board, but no movement from Danielle Smith and the UCP. So for all the pro-lifers out there that thought that Danielle Smith was a better bet, who almost lost an election by only 1,600 votes in 5 different ridings in Calgary, than Travis Taves or even Jason Kenney, welcome to your new Alberta, where we just balance an NDP budget.
Yeah, well, hopefully that changes. And I think coming up in upcoming elections, it's not so much like, oh, are you pro-life? It's specifically, we should be interviewing these people like, will you repeal this? Will you vote this way? Like actually push specific policy because it's just not enough anymore to ask, where they stand on these issues, but what they're going to do about it. Let's take a take a page from Sabrina Maddow's book, but in the opposite direction.
We live in a world that grows through communication.
Every connection comes from a dream to be heard and realized.
To welcome a better future. What are your dreams?
LaRosse Media will help communicate your vision through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Start building connections to your future audience. Visit larosmedia.com
and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
So I know for people who listen to our podcast somewhat regularly, Scott and I are obsessed with the weather and we always talk about it like 90-year-olds. And specifically recently out in the West, the weather's been totally insane. Like I think the Alberta had the coldest day since in like 52 years or something. It was like a minus 50 something day. I'm sure it's pretty frigid in Manitoba. I think minus 50 is like an average day in Manitoba in the winter.
Not too bad right now.
So,
It's like it's only like minus 10 or something like that right now.
oh, it's only minus 10. It's not bad. So I thought that it would be a fun, interesting segment to talk about the weird things and strange facts about Canada's climate. So you think you might know everything about Canada and the weather, but do you? I did get these facts from CBC's The Wild Canadian Year blog, basically the only time you should ever read the CBC. Here we go. Number one is Canada is as tall as it is wide, creating a wide range of climate conditions. So Canada has the largest latitude range of any country on the planet. The southern border lies at the same latitude as Northern California, while our northern edge reaches right to the top of the world. It's rarely the same season in the same place at the same time. In early April, the Arctic may still be in the throes of a frigid winter, while the South can experience summer-like temperatures. No doubt, our weather forecasters are the busiest in the world. So I took this from a website that talked about the.
Oh, really? I thought you wrote all these.
Yeah, it was all in my head, but that is I had no idea, and that does make sense because our weather's absolutely wacky. And I didn't really notice too much how crazy it was in Ontario because it's pretty mellow, but moving out west, holy man, it has changed my perspective.
Yeah, you're not in a temperate climate anymore. Okay, number two, also from that CBC blog, Canada has an iceberg alley. I knew this one already. Pieces of glaciers from the coast of Greenland are picked up by the Labrador Current, a counterclockwise vortex of waters in the North Atlantic Ocean. Those broken pieces become icebergs that float in the sea off northeast Newfoundland, where Fogo Island lies. Navigating the area is risky for ships. In fact, this is where the mighty Titanic sank on her maiden voyage in April of 1912. But it's a boon to tourism. Iceberg seekers float to the area to watch safely from the shore and boast about drinking 10,000-year-old fresh water taken from an iceberg floating in the ocean.
I can safely say that iceberg water does not taste any different than normal water.
Have you had iceberg water?
In Alberta, yeah. That
Glacier
iceberg.
water?
Sorry?
Like glacier water?
No, isn't there an iceberg? It's a big iceberg that's by there's a lookout. I'm totally blanking. Between Jasper and Alberta and Calgary, and there's like a big lookout, and it has a glass floor.
You,
And
you,
you
you mean
can
a
buy the
glacier?
bus.
A glacier, not an iceberg.
Sure.
A glacier, yeah. Icebergs are in the water.
I know, but I'm pretty sure it was a whatever. Maybe I just drank glacier water.
Glacier. Yeah, I had it. I
Ev-
had it one time, but it was during forest fires, and my wife and I were coming down from the mountain, and then we were heading back up to Edmonton, and we were tasting the glacier water. We're like, well, this is like really clear, really cold water, which is great, but it's kind of got this funny taste. And we figured out it was smoked, so the water had a smoky flavor. It was so
That is
good.
weird.
So yeah,
Ew.
I'm gonna start smoking my water.
Every winter, southern Alberta is the Chinook capital. Now we should send this to Leonardo DiCaprio because he clearly doesn't know
Yeah.
this. But from November to May, warm, dry winds rush down the slope of the Rocky Mountains towards southern Alberta, often moving a hurricane force speeds of 120 kilometers per hour. They could bring astonishing temperature changes and melt ice within a couple of hours. In 1962, Pincher Creek saw a record temperature rise of 41 degrees Celsius from minus 19 to 22 in just 1 hour. That is wild. Chinook is known as the ice eater among locals who appreciate the break from the winter that the winds provide. So this is like my number one. I have lots of reasons why Calgary is the best city in the country, and this is a huge one. Because people are like, oh, I don't like the cold. I don't like the cold. Okay, well, I have lived in Ontario and I've been in Ottawa quite a lot. Even my mom, who lives in Kingston, and that winter, yeah, those winters are so freezing cold, especially in Ottawa. It's so painful. It's like wet, your face is stinging. It's just terrible. Here, yeah, it's cold, but it's not like you want to kill yourself cold because it's a dry cold. And then it never lasts for very long because you always have a Chinook. So, yeah, okay, sure. Like a couple of weeks ago, we had, minus 30, the coldest day, minus 50 or whatever. And then like now it's 1 degrees and it's totally fine. So it doesn't last. It's not like you're living in Antarctica where it's like a whole month or 2 months straight of minus 30. I would never live in a place like that. That's basically where you live, though. But the Chinooks are the absolute best part of Alberta winters. And another thing is that Alberta is insanely sunny. So even with minus 40 and minus 50, the sun is blaring. So you're like in BC, you would get depressed. Or maybe even in Winnipeg or wherever. But here, it's like, yeah, it's cold, but you would never know looking outside. It looks beautiful and sunny, and it looks super warm. So you can fake it till you make it.
So you're the one who chose this topic to talk about at the end, which is fine. I get the feeling from listening to talk about these little stats and the passion that you have in your voice, that you had some sort of run-in with someone recently about how terrible the weather is in Calgary, and now you're like super defending it.
Well,
Like that
why?
was
Why
like
would they say that?
I don't know. Listen, I'm just saying that I feel like you had some sort of run-in from maybe
Oh
a
no,
family member.
I didn't have a run-in. I just think that because I've lived in different parts of Ontario, but I've also traveled, like you and I have traveled across the country in all different climates,
Yep.
and I've been able to experience firsthand weather from the farthest of Newfoundland to, BC and stuff. And I hate both of those climates basically. I specifically hate BC because I love BC so much. Like I love the province, I love the sushi, I love the food, I love the atmosphere. It's so beautiful, but the weather, I could never live there just because of the weather. Maybe Vancouver Island, but even still, probably not. And I think that's such a huge downfall. But here you have everything. You have it all. So yeah, once you go,
Maybe they could have used this clip for remember that like Kenny campaign to like get people to move to
yeah.
Alberta? They could use it for that. Okay, moving on. Oh, I get another Newfoundland one. Okay. Newfoundland is the foggiest place in the world. At the Grand Banks off of Newfoundland, the cold water from the Labrador Current from the north meets with the warmer Gulf Stream from the south. The result is a whopping 206 days of fog a year. In the summer, it's foggy 84% of the time. It's also the richest fishery in the world. The fog is a serious hazard to ships in the region.
I mean, Newfoundland has a really cool culture to it. And when you go there, it's like you're not in Canada anymore. And it's sort of like going to another country. But none of this is good. I don't like any of it.
I mean,
No, thank you.
it was its own dominion until 1949.
Yeah. But yeah, I would definitely encourage people to visit, but living, maybe not so much. Canada's north is actually a desert. Canada's north is cold and dry with very little precipitation, ranging from 10 to 20 centimeters a year. Temperatures average below freezing most of the year. Together, they limit the diversity of plants and animals found in the north. And it's huge. The polar desert covers 1/7 of Canada's total land mass,
I can't
which
wait
is
till when we
wild.
go and do a presentation in the north.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I
so fascinating.
know. I can't believe I've never been.
We'll get
It's,
there. We'll
yeah,
get there.
it's wild.
Okay, in 1816, Canada did not have a summer. If winter in Canada weren't bad enough, in 1816, the country's eastern population was sledding in June and thawing water cisterns in July. Trees shed their leaves, and there were reports of migratory birds dropping dead in the streets. Over in Europe, the weird weather stoked anti American sentiment. People opposed to emigration said that North America was inhospitable and getting colder by the year. Ironically, as eastern Canada stayed cool, the Arctic warmed, creating flotillas of icebergs off the coast of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. At the time, it was thought that the icebergs were the cause of the cooling, like a giant glass of ice and lemonade. What was the real reason? Well, in 1815, the year before, the Tambora volcano erupted in Indonesia, spewing tons of ash and dust into the air. Less sunlight reached the Earth, and this caused the planet's surface to cool. The volcanic eruption changed the climate in different ways around the world, but Eastern Canadians were treated to the summer that didn't come.
That would be terrible.
It's kind of scary how, like, just, a couple degrees change from, not having sunlight can have such a mammoth negative effect.
Absolutely.
Or was
The
that
Bay,
was that stupid movie, The Day After Tomorrow? That's what it reminds me of.
yeah, yeah. The Bay of Fundy has the largest tides in the world. So twice each day, 160 billion tons of seawater flow in and out of this small area in Nova Scotia, more than the combined flow of the world's freshwater rivers. The tide reached a peak of 16 meters, as high as a 5-story building, and take about 6 hours to come in. The most extreme tides in the bay occur twice each month when the Earth, Moon, and Sun are in alignment, and together they create a larger than usual gravitational pull on the ocean, creating a spring tide, which is crazy. Because you and I have seen this. Like there are
Yep.
little restaurants, and actually, I remember during the 2019 election, a bunch of us were out there and we went into this cave like in the morning and explored all around this like muddy area, went to the restaurant, had some seafood, drove to our presentation, drove back, and everything was completely covered in water. It was so weird to think that just like a few hours earlier we were in that cave. But it is really, really cool to see. The Bay of Fundy is definitely very neat. Um, yeah. Again, Nova Scotia, but I would never live there. But that's cool.
Number
And
8.
finally,
Oh, okay. I'm good to go. Number 8.
yes.
Something about Ontario. Finally, okay.
Mhm.
Windsor is the thunderstorm capital of Canada. The name of the hockey team. Hot, humid air from the
Yeah.
Gulf of Mexico funnels up through Windsor and the western basin of Lake Erie, creating the perfect conditions for thunderstorms. About 250 lightning flashes per 100 square kilometers happen every year when small pieces of frozen raindrops collide within the thunderclouds. The clouds fill with electrical charges that are eventually funneled to the ground as lightning. Now, you grew up not far from Windsor, just north.
Mhm.
Can you confirm this?
Yeah, this actually makes me think of a sad story. Oh, I yanked out my headphone. In grade 8, I will never forget, we went on a field trip to Toronto and we went to what's that big the Palladium. It's like a big arcade. And I think we went elsewhere. I don't know why just the Palladium sticks out in my mind, but it was like a super fun day trip to Toronto. You know, you get up super early, go, you're with all your friends, and you come back. And I remember the bus pulling up, and a lot of parents were standing around, but it was like something felt off, and one of the guys in my class came home from the field trip to discover that his dad was riding his bike in a rainstorm and got struck by lightning and died. So he
Whoa.
came back to that news, and everyone was there trying to like comfort him and stuff like that, and it was just really sad. And that's like basically what I remember from the grade 8 field trip, but I'm sure that was very, very traumatizing for him and super, super sad. But yeah, in Sarnia, you would get a lot of uh, really bad thunder and rain, and sometimes hurricanes too.
Like hurricanes or tornadoes?
Hurricanes? What's the difference? I'm like really
Hurricanes,
pregnant right now. Huh?
hurricanes feed off the water. The hurricanes will feed off like air pressure change within like the Gulf of Mexico, or they call them typhoons, like out in Australia. A tornado is change in air temperature over a landmass.
Yeah,
Where
like I think a hurricane, because we would sometimes go in the basement, but like there was never any like tornado damage or anything like that went through the city.
Here's the difference between hurricanes and tornadoes and glaciers and icebergs. This is a very, very bad topic for me.
Okay, listen. I'm super pregnant, so I'm just blaming it on baby brain, which is a real thing. Maybe we'll talk about the science behind that next time.
I can't wait for your big brain facts.
Earlier, before the podcast started, I have a new ring light, and I'm like looking around for like 10 minutes how to turn this thing on. It's plugged in and everything. I cannot figure it out. So I called our producer Dave, and he's like, "Oh, there's this switch on the cord," and lo and behold, this little on switch right here, which was super embarrassing. But that's just the way it is right now. So I will study about hurricanes and tornadoes. I mean, they're not that different, both of those things.
Yes.
Like a glacier and an iceberg, they're
You
ice.
you research and you come back to the next podcast and you tell us your findings. And
Okay.
maybe there is no difference, but there's actually a massive difference.
Okay, fine. Next podcast, I
Yeah.
will find out different facts, and I will quiz you on whether you think it's a glacier or an iceberg or a hurricane or a
Are you gonna
tornado.
show pictures? Are you gonna be like,
No.
you a robot or a human?
No pictures.
Is
You
there
don't get any
a difference between
hints.
an iceberg and a glacier? And that was like, the 9 boxes or whatever. It's like you have to just choose icebergs, and that's the only way you can access your bank account or something like that. You never.
Oh, I'd be poor, very, very poor. I'd be locked out. It would be like the Emergencies Act on my ass right there.
That's right, which apparently
Like,
is not constitutional for now until the Supreme Court actually rules that it's constitutional, which should probably be the case.
well, we hope you learned a lot about hockey and glaciers and weather and maybe a little bit about politics this podcast. What we are trying to do in 2024 is to build our audience. And so, one of the ways that we want to do that is by getting some guests on every other podcast that you would enjoy listening to. So, if you have some ideas for guests that you want us to interview or talk to, let us know. You can comment on the podcast on YouTube, on Rumble, on Spotify, Google Podcast, or just hit us up on social media at RightNow HQ on most sites. And we look forward to talking with you. And another last announcement that I'll say is that in 2024, we're going to have a regular release date as well. And at the end of the last year, it got really iffy because Scott was moving and we had all this stuff going on. But now we're going to have a regular release date, which will hopefully be every other Friday. So look out for that. And we'll talk to you soon.
Bye for now.